So, mission. First off, mission's a very specific word. But for all of us, we just need to think of mission as criteria for success. It can be called objective, it can be called goal, but in the military, it's a mission. Let's have a look at what our mission was in Iraq in 2006. Let's have a quick geography and history lesson.
Let's have a bit of a lesson. Always fascinating to have a lesson with you. So talk us through, so down here's Kuwait. Take us through the rest of this map.
Kuwait, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Basra, port city for Iraq, and up here is Baghdad. That's about 540 kilometers from Basra, the port city, to the capital. There's a line here. Some bits are very straight and some bits are very wiggly, and that is the border between Iran and Iraq. And on that border is a town called Al Amara. And Al Amara is in the center of Maysan province. So these straight lines are not exactly normal, especially given that only 100 years ago, none of these were nation states. Instead, they were gatherings of families and tribes. And the British, in a piece of possibly arrogant colonialism, I know I've got a few Australians on this particular call, in a piece of arrogant colonialism, drew straight lines. Straight lines do not work when families and tribes are divided. And much of the warfare that took place between Iran and Iraq was a direct result of those straight lines from 1920, 100 years ago. So we move on and we zoom in on this area, and specifically the town of Al Amara. Al Amara. On the River Tigris, a fertile river with marshes to the south and desert either side. And the marshes then developed into the River Tigris, and the Tigris goes all the way up to Baghdad, getting bigger and bigger.
So tell me a little bit about this little tiny spot here. So how big is this little spot on the map?
Well, I don't know if you can even see it from Australia or the UK. But this little spot on the map marks roughly, because somewhere in the center of it, an area of about 3 to 4 football fields. And that was Camp Abu Naji. And Camp Abu Naji was a former Ba'ath Party prison, a hated area, because the Al Amarans were not popular with Saddam Hussein. The Maysanis are a fiercely proud, culturally unique people. And they have more to do with the people on the other side of the straight line than they do with the people up in Baghdad.
So tell me about what they even did, what Saddam Hussein used them for during the war with Iran.
Well, these people were not his favorites. So what he did, and we're talking about a border which is just off the map on the right-hand side here, he would march the people of Al Amara across the minefields unarmed so that they didn't lose any weapons in order to clear the minefields for his troops from Baghdad. Not surprisingly, the memories of these people were pretty poisonous when it came to 1991 and we invaded. And we invaded with a promise to remove Saddam Hussein in their minds, which we didn't follow through on, but they rose up with us in 1991 and opposed Saddam Hussein. We then left and left them to Saddam Hussein's wrath. So even after that, he stopped supplying the Maysanis. He stopped giving any sort of state aid to Al Amara, a city of 400,000 people who were now the poorest people in the whole of Iraq. Let's sit down and we'll move on.
Yeah, so I'm thinking a little bit about what you've spoken about here. So today we're talking about pivot or perish. So we're talking about maintaining a mission and changing the strategy. So when you were there maintaining that mission, what was the mission? In your head, what was the mission?
Well, the mission was probably quite ill-conceived because, first off, it involved democracy. And democracy as we, the Westerners, understood democracy, not as the people of this region believe in democracy. Now, if you give somebody a vote here, if you give a female in 2006 the vote, It's new. Never been done before. So the first thing that happens is that she asks her husband, how should I vote? He says, wait, I shall ask my father how we should vote. The father says, son, wait, I shall ask the head of the family, your uncle, how we should vote. The uncle asks the tribal leader how the tribe is going to vote. The tribal leader asks the majlis of tribal leaders how they are all going to vote, and then they vote. That is a free vote in Iraq. That is their version of democracy. It's not ours. So the first thing was to build a nation with democracy, rebuild it from what were only ashes. Very, very poor people, very intermittent electricity supply, hospitals that were dilapidated and fallen down, schools that didn't work at all, and a police force that was completely corrupt. A young man would try to enter the police. He had to pay $1,000 US to even be considered. In order to gain $1,000, his family would sell all their assets to get him into the police. Why? Because a policeman is a rich man. And a policeman is a rich man who will support his whole wider extended family for the rest of their lives. Because policemen make a lot of money. They are not paid a lot of money. They make a lot of money. So we had this corrupt police force, and we were bringing what we thought was good police practice. And so I spent a lot of time giving out certificates, like on this picture, to newly qualified policemen who had actually bought their place in the police with all of their family's goods. So they gave up their whole herd of sheep in order to get one policeman into the police force. Now, the police force were government troops. On the other side in Al-Amara were the militias. They were normally at loggerheads with the police, but we gave them a unifying goal, and that was to get rid of the British, who, from about 48 hours after the invasion in 2003, liberation in 2003, about 48 hours later, we became occupying forces in their minds. They were again invaded. So we arrived with 800 troops into this tiny little area with a sandy bund around it. It was an oblong. It had a few concrete buildings with tin roofs, but otherwise it was just a sandy piece of desert. And it was summer, and it was getting hotter. Many people in Dubai will understand how unpleasant that can be.
I think even a few Queenslanders on this call will understand that as well.
So our job was not just to look after nation building in a democratic form, but also to stop the flow of arms, ammunition, and explosives that were coming in from Iran. Iran desperate to destabilize the Western coalition. And to do that, they moved weapons through a very porous border, albeit very mined border after all of the years of fighting, 9 years of Iran-Iraq war. And they knew the routes through, and they were moving large quantities of arms, ammunition, that then flowed through Meizan, through the area that we were tasked to stop, and up into Baghdad, where they were used to attack the American forces. The Americans saw us as a failing defensive position. Why? Because we were this 800-strong set of troops sitting in a little box outside a city of 400,000, all of whom were armed and all of whom hated us.
And so I think this is a nice juncture to stop here, because we're going to send some people out into some breakout rooms shortly, David. Tell me, because you had a large overarching mission that we now understand. One was, which was to nation build for the people of Iraq. Very noble. Two was to protect the Americans, essentially.
Yes.
From the flow of weapons in from Iran that then made their way to Baghdad. But you had an overarching in your mind, as you spent all those months training and preparing. What was a key criteria for success for you?
It was unspoken, and it certainly wasn't official, but I was determined to bring every man and woman that I took into Iraq back alive.
Fantastic.
Now,
So that was interesting.
And let's face it, we were not just soldiers. When we arrived, we were given experts at police procedures, some of them American. From 23 nations, we had experts in hospital administration, in medicine, in school administration, in teaching. We had all the experts, and at times that 800 swelled to 1,400 people in this tiny little box of sand with a few hardened buildings and a lot of tentage. And those people were lovely. They were fantastic. They were amusing, they were brave, and they were mostly volunteering. Some of them were very amusing. This is the doctor's idea of fun. That's a man having a cigarette. And I made sure that they all joined in with everything that the battle group did. So, of course, me being me, and most of you understand, we all went running on a regular basis and stayed fit. They were the most amazing team of individuals, all of whom were doing this for the good of the country that we were in. And yet we were hated. So we went expecting to be received with open arms, and we discovered the Wild West. My predecessor was very quick to depart as soon as we arrived, and his last words were to me, "Keep your head down."
Yeah. And so in this time of unprecedented change and challenge for many people, and I know that many people on the call today are seeing this time as real opportunity, but genuine challenge as well. So we're going to send you out to a breakout room now.
I would like to say, just on the resource side, before we get to the breakout room, that I had soldiers, and we had the most wonderful civilians, and we had local people coming in from the local town who were also understanding, a few of them, that we were trying to do good. The last thing we had was money. Oodles of money. In fact, this is a picture of my paymaster looking at the safe in my office, which at this point had $15 million in it. And it never had less than $10 million in it. So we had money, we had the wherewithal to deliver a functioning country, but we did not have the consent of the people.
Interesting. So thinking about those pieces about, and we're going to be looking at that later today as well, relationships and resources and how important those are as well. I'm going to send you out into a breakout room now. We're only going to send you out for 5 minutes. We'd like you to go out and think, given where you are at the moment, what's your mission? Yeah, and we'd like you to make sure that it is simple. Now, simple and easy are two different things, obviously. So Mubarak and Romwell are about to send you out into the breakout room. We'd like you to really think clearly around what your mission is.